The wind screamed through the high desert like a banshee torn from the grave. Snow swept sideways across the land, erasing tracks, swallowing sounds, and coating everything in a deadly silence. The world was white and gray and dead. Mary Whitlock's axe struck frozen wood with dull, stubborn thunks. Her breath puffed in clouds before her face, but she didn't feel the cold anymore. Cold had lived in her bones since Benjamin died, since the smoke, since the blood. The cabin behind her groaned as the wind pushed against it. The walls were cedar, tight and strong, built by Benjamin's hands. She'd patched the roof herself after the last storm. The chickens hadn't frozen this time. That was something. Her life had been reduced to counting little mercies like chicken lives. Then came a sound, a low, rasping groan. Mary froze. The axe slipped from her numb fingers and landed silently in the snow. She turned, scanning the tree-line behind the barn. Nothing, just shadows and white and wind. Her fingers drifted to the rifle slung over her shoulder. Another groan, closer now. Weak, human. She stepped around the barn, boots crunching softly on the crusted snow. There, half buried beneath the overhang, was a man. At first, she thought he was dead. Then he moved barely. His eyes fluttered open, dark and wild, unfocused. Blood soaked his side. Snow had begun to freeze in his hair. Apache. Every muscle in her body went tight. Her hand tightened around the rifle. Her first instinct was to aim. Her second was to pull the trigger. Somewhere deep in her gut, her dead husband's voice rose like a ghost. "You're not a killer, Mary." She hesitated. The man blinked slowly, watching her without fear. He was broken, not dangerous. Not now. Still, the rifle stayed pointed at his chest. "Are you alone?" she demanded, voice hoarse from disuse. "Are there more of you?" He didn't answer, didn't move. Mary stood there for what felt like an eternity, gun trained on a dying man, heart hammering like it wanted out of her chest. The wind shrieked overhead. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled. She lowered the rifle. God help her. She dragged him inside. It took all her strength to haul his limp, heavy form across the threshold. Once inside, she laid him on the floor near the fire and slammed the door shut behind her, barring it with a thick wooden plank. Snow blew in through the cracks, swirling like ghosts. Her hands shook as she knelt beside him. He was burning up. Fever. She pulled his shirt aside. An arrow shaft stuck out below his ribs. Old wound, festering. Infection had taken hold. "You're going to die," she muttered, more to herself than to him. His eyes fluttered open again. He looked straight at her, and for a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not trust, not understanding, just survival. Mary found herself moving on instinct. She heated water over the fire, tore linen strips from an old petticoat, and snapped the shaft of the arrow. His body convulsed with pain, but he didn't scream. When she pulled it free, he grabbed the floorboards with white-knuckled fists, but made no sound. Blood poured out, dark and sluggish. She cleaned and packed the wound as best she could, then wrapped it tight. He passed out cold. She sat back on her heels, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't hers. Then she stood, took the rifle, and laid it on the table within reach. She didn't sleep that night. The wind howled for hours. Snow piled high against the cabin walls. The fire popped and hissed, casting flickering shadows across the floor. Mary sat by the window, rifle on her lap, eyes never leaving the man. He didn't move, just breathed, shallow and slow. She thought about the stories. Raids, scalping, fire, and death. She thought about Benjamin's broken body, the way the neighbors whispered about how savages left nothing behind but ash and fear. So why had she saved one? At dawn, the storm broke. Pale light filtered through the frost-rimmed glass. The man was still alive, barely. She pressed a hand to his forehead. The fever had broken. His breathing was stronger now. She sat by the fire with a tin of coffee, watching him sleep. That afternoon, he woke again, this time alert. He sat up slowly, pain etched into every movement. His eyes, sharp and black as obsidian, locked onto hers. She reached for the rifle. He didn't move. Silence stretched between them, brittle and thick. "I could have let you die," she said. He said nothing. I should have. Still nothing. Then, finally he spoke. Just one word, rough with pain and accent. Why? Mary blinked. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice didn't sound like she expected. It wasn't cruel or savage. Just tired. Because I'm not you, she said, colder than she meant to. He looked away. The days that followed were tense. He was too weak to move far, but strong enough to keep his eyes on her. She kept her rifle within reach. She rationed food. There wasn't much. Snow still blocked the trail to town. They were trapped together, alone in a world that wanted them both dead. On the third day, she found him outside, barefoot in the snow. What the hell are you doing? She snapped. He didn't answer, just stood there, face to the wind, arms open slightly. She watched him. He looked like he was praying. He collapsed. She cursed and hauled him back inside. That night, she put an extra blanket over him. Not out of kindness, just practicality. Or so she told herself. The next evening, they ate together in silence. Beans and stale bread. He didn't complain. She didn't speak. When she stood to clear the tin plates, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. Carved wood, worn smooth. He slid it across the table. A figure. A bird, maybe. Or a hawk. Primitive, yet beautiful. Mary stared at it. He nodded once, a gesture of offering. She didn't take it. That night, as the fire burned low and snow whispered against the walls, she sat beside him on the floor. Not close, just near. Do you have a name? She asked. A long silence. Then Taza. She nodded. Mary. He looked at her, and in that moment, something settled. Not peace, not understanding, but the first fragile thread of something else. The wind howled outside. Inside, they listened to each other breathe. And for the first time since the storm began, Mary felt less alone. Taza healed in silence. His footsteps, once staggered and slow, grew firmer with each passing day. He chopped wood without instruction, hauled water from the frozen stream, and repaired the barn roof with the same quiet precision he had when gutting a deer. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were deliberate, as if the weight of language itself mattered. Mary watched him warily. She didn't trust him, couldn't, but she couldn't deny his presence changed the rhythm of the cabin. It wasn't just her breath anymore echoing in the cold. The quiet had company. Then the horses came. It was near sundown when she heard them, 3, maybe 4, riders galloping hard through the snow. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She grabbed the rifle, shoved it into Taza's hands, and pointed to the cellar door beneath the floorboards. Go. Now. He looked at her, eyes narrowed, hesitant. Do it, she snapped. He vanished without another word, disappearing into the dark beneath the floor. She threw a wool rug over the trapdoor and rushed to the table just as fists pounded on the door. She opened it. Deputy Harlan stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men with rifles and the look of men who liked trouble more than justice. Harlan's mustache twitched as he smiled without warmth. Evening, Miss Whitlock, he drawled, stepping inside without invitation. Deputy, she greeted, masking her panic. What brings you this far out? He looked around, slow and deliberate. Apache raiding party hit a mining caravan south of here. Lost 3 men. One of the raiders was wounded. We tracked blood through the woods. She forced her hand to stay steady. That's so. He walked to the fireplace, studied the ashes. Snow's been heavy. Anyone stopped by for shelter? No one. She lied, the word dry in her mouth. One of the men moved toward the bedroom. There's nothing back there, she said quickly. He ignored her. Harlan approached the table. His eyes flicked down. There, barely visible beneath the edge of the rug, was a drop of blood. She stepped forward, blocking his view. You wouldn't lie to the law, would you, Mary? He asked, voice low now. I buried a husband 6 months ago, deputy. Why would I invite more trouble? Harlan studied her. The silence stretched too long. Then the other man returned, shaking his head. Nothing. Harlan let out a theatrical sigh, adjusted his gloves. Well, he said, stepping to the door. If you see anything at all, you send word. Won't you? I will. He lingered in the doorway, gaze narrowing. Be ashamed if someone thought you were harboring a savage. That kind of sympathy gets women hanged in these parts. She met his gaze. Then it's a good thing I'm not. He tipped his hat and left. The sound of hooves faded into the wind. Mary waited a full minute before pulling back the rug and lifting the cellar hatch. Taza climbed out, his face unreadable. She didn't look at him, just picked up the rifle and leaned it against the hearth. Later, she sat at the table, shaking, unable to lift the spoon of cold stew to her lips. Taza placed a tin mug of water in front of her. She took it without thanks. "They'll come back," she said. "Yes," he answered. "What happens then?" He didn't reply, just stared into the fire. The next morning brought no sun, just a heavy gray sky and the kind of stillness that felt like a warning. Mary was milking the goat when she heard footsteps crunching outside. Too light to be horses, too many to be friendly. She turned slowly, for men stood at the edge of the clearing. Harland was among them. He held a piece of paper in one hand, and in the other, the preacher from the township. Behind them stood a scowling marshal and a boy no older than 16 gripping a pistol with both hands. Mary stepped forward, hands empty. "What is this?" she asked. Harland held up the paper. "Executive order." Found it tucked in an old code of territorial conduct. If a settler is found to have taken in an Indian trespasser and not turned him over, the law deems the act as harboring a fugitive enemy. Mary felt the blood drain from her face. "You said there was no one here," Harland continued. "But we know you lied. Found boot tracks. 2 sets. One yours. Why not?" "I don't." He cut her off. "Now, the law gives you a choice. You can face charges for conspiracy and sedition, or," he glanced at the preacher, "or you sanctify it. Make it legal." It took a moment before she understood. Her stomach turned. "You want me to marry him?" Harlan smiled. "If he's your husband, then he's not a trespasser. He's family. Territorial law doesn't care much about love, only legality." The preacher cleared his throat awkwardly. "You be spared prosecution. Both of you." Mary looked at the marshal. He shrugged. "It's frontier justice. Ugly, but it sticks." She looked past them. Taza stood at the doorway, eyes on her. He stepped forward. "No," she whispered, but he kept walking. He stopped beside her, stood tall despite the bruises and healing wound. The preacher opened his Bible. "Shall we?" Mary couldn't move. "Say yes," Harlan said, voice like gravel. Taza turned to her, not pleading, just waiting. She closed her eyes. Then, softly, yes. The preacher spoke quickly, the words meaningless. A mockery of what the ceremony was supposed to mean. Mary barely heard it. Her mind was spinning. When it came time to speak, she forced the word through clenched teeth. "I do." Taza said nothing for a long moment. Then, evenly, "I do." The preacher closed his Bible. "It is done," he said, "by law and word." Harlan grinned. "Enjoy your honeymoon," he said, turning back toward the trees. They left without another word. When the last of the footsteps faded, Mary turned to Taza, rage and disbelief building like a storm. "Why?" she hissed. "Because now. They leave you alone," he replied. She shoved past him and went inside, slamming the door behind her. He followed quietly, sat on the floor near the fire, cross-legged, as if nothing had changed. Mary stood at the window for a long time, arms folded, shaking with fury. Not at him, not entirely. At them, at the law, at this land that twisted right and wrong until they were indistinguishable. She turned. "You're not my husband." Taza didn't look up. "I know, and I don't want your protection." Still, he didn't move. "I know." She stood over him, voice low and tight. "This changes nothing." He looked up now, eyes sharp. "Yes," he said, "but it changes everything for them." Mary stared at him, then turned to the fire. Outside, a fresh wind picked up. Inside, the walls held, but only barely. The days after the forced marriage were strange and slow. Mary moved through them like a ghost, her body performing the motions of living, feeding the animals, mending clothes, chopping wood, but her mind drifted elsewhere. She no longer knew if she hated Taza or the law more. She only knew the weight hadn't lifted. It had shifted. Taza kept his distance, sleeping near the hearth and rising before dawn to work. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't assume rights he hadn't earned. But still, his presence lingered in every corner of the cabin like smoke. When he moved, it was with care. When he looked at her, it was never with expectation. That made it worse. On the sixth night, a windstorm rolled across the ridge, thrashing trees and rattling the window panes. The fire roared inside, throwing red light against the log walls. Mary sat at the table, carving a piece of wood without purpose. Taza sat across from her, sharpening a hunting knife with slow, steady strokes. Neither spoke. Thunder cracked in the distance. Then abruptly, Taza set the knife down. "I will leave," he said. Mary didn't look up. "They'll come back if you do. They'll find you. Or me. I will go far." She scoffed. "They'll still hang me for helping you. For not stopping you." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "What do you want?" She set the wood down and met his gaze. "I want my husband back. I want to not wake up every day with a gun by the bed. I want peace. And none of that lives out here. Not anymore." His eyes didn't flinch, but something softened in them. Not pity. He never gave her that. Something else. Understanding, maybe. "I had a wife," he said quietly. Mary's heart stuttered. She hadn't expected that. "She died in a raid. Not mine. Bluecoats. They came at night. Burned everything. Took our boy. I don't know where he is. Maybe gone. Maybe still somewhere." She said nothing, the silence between them pulsing with weight. Taza looked into the fire. "You think I was the one who killed your husband?" "I don't know. I wasn't." Mary's throat tightened. "They said the Apache did it. Some did. Some didn't. It was war." She wanted to scream, wanted to throw her cup against the wall and curse every man who ever rode into a village with fire and blood. But she didn't. Instead, she asked the question that had haunted her for months. "Why him?" Taza shook his head. "Wrong place. Wrong color. Same reason they took my son." Silence returned, heavy and unkind. The fire crackled, low and steady. Outside, the wind began to die down. Inside, Mary whispered, "I buried him in the grove, under the cedar." Taza nodded. He understood what it meant to keep a memory close, even when the body had long since gone cold. They sat like that for hours, two strangers with too much pain between them, sharing warmth only because the world outside was colder. By morning, the snow had turned to slush, and the trail down the ridge was slick and treacherous. Mary went out to feed the chickens, and when she returned, she found Taza standing at the window, watching the horizon. "Riders," he said. Her breath caught. "Harlan." He nodded once. "How many?" "3. One's new." Mary's hands shook as she reached for the rifle. Maybe they're just passing through. But she didn't believe it. Neither did he. They moved quickly, checking the cellar, the barn, the attic. No place to hide this time. Taza strapped on his belt and sheathed the knife he had been sharpening for days. Mary stuffed shells in her apron pocket, her mouth dry as sand. When the knock came, it was polite. Too polite. Mary opened the door. It wasn't Harlan this time. The man in front wore a long black duster and a silver badge dulled by dust and time. His eyes were pale, cruel things. He smiled like a man who didn't smile often and didn't mean it when he did. "Miss Whitlock," he drawled. "Marshall King, I understand you've had a change of household." Mary said nothing. He gestured to the others behind him. Harlan stood off to the side, looking nervous. The boy with the pistol wasn't there this time. King stepped inside. "I've seen a lot of things on this frontier. Seen good folks push too far. Seen savages do worse. But you marrying one of them? That's new." Mary stood tall. "It's legal." King smirked. "Sure, legal, but not right." Taza stood behind her, still quiet, watching. King's eyes drifted past her. "You know, my brother died at the hands of his people. So I got a bit of sensitivity to this kind of thing." "Then you shouldn't be here," Mary said sharply. King chuckled. "See, that's the thing. A town can't abide uncertainty. You bring chaos into order, and folks get nervous. So I've got to make an example." Mary reached for the rifle at her side. King's hand hovered near his holster. A long, taut moment passed. Then Taza stepped forward. "Let them take me," he said. Mary spun. "No." He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on King. "Blood for blood," Taza said. "That's what you came for." King raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering?" Taza nodded once. You hang me. Leave her alone. Mary stepped between them. You touch him, and I'll shoot. King laughed. You're not going to shoot a lawman. I buried one husband already, she said. Don't think I won't do it again. Her voice didn't shake. King stared at her. Really stared. Then something in his posture shifted. Not fear, not respect, but caution. Let's go, he muttered, turning away. We'll find him dead in a ditch soon enough. Harlan hesitated, then followed. The door closed. Mary sank to the floor. Taza knelt beside her. He didn't touch her, just waited. I wasn't ready, she whispered. I didn't know I could do that. You were ready, he said. She looked at him. In his eyes, there was no pride, no judgment, just quiet truth. They sat there, the fire burning low. Outside, the wind changed. Inside, something else did too. Smoke curled into the morning sky. Mary stood outside the cabin, apron stained with soot, watching the last curls of black rise from the charred remnants of the barn. Fire had come fast, too fast. Set deliberately. Tracks in the mud told the rest of the story. 2 horses. Heavy boots. 1 match. No cattle survived. No tools. No feed. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just stood there, letting the ruins speak for itself. Taza stepped out behind her. His eyes swept the blackened skeleton of the barn. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Mary turned to him. This was a warning. He nodded. They want us gone. Or dead. The silence between them wasn't fear anymore. It was planning. They spent the day digging through ash, pulling out what could be salvaged, very little. The barn had gone up too fast. The snow didn't help. It only slowed the flames enough to tease hope. Taza took the trail west that afternoon, hunting with nothing but his knife and a coil of cord. Mary repaired what she could inside the house, reinforced the doors, checked the rifle. She kept waiting for fear to return, but it didn't. Not this time. By dusk, he came back with 2 hares and a rabbit snare. His hands were bloodied, knuckles scraped. She cleaned them in silence. He didn't flinch. That night, thunder rolled far in the distance, low and distant like drums echoing across the land. She couldn't sleep. Neither could he. She found him outside, sharpening a broken axe head by moonlight. The glow made his face look hollow, carved from stone. I had a dream, she said softly. He didn't look up. There was fire, and a man standing in it. Not afraid, not even burning, just standing there like the flames were his. I think it was you. Taza set down the axe head. Fire doesn't burn what's already ash. She sat beside him. You think we're broken, don't you? I know we are. Mary stared at the horizon. And yet we keep moving. He nodded. Because there is no before. Only after. They heard the horse before they saw it. Just one this time. It rode hard up the trail, fast and reckless. Mary grabbed the rifle. Taza stepped forward. The rider pulled up near the fence, nearly slipping on the icy mud. It was Harlan, alone, his face pale, clothes disheveled. You need to run, he said, voice ragged. Mary stepped forward. Why would you warn us? Harlan swallowed. Because I saw what they're planning. Marshal King ain't waiting on no warrant this time. He's coming at dawn, with 4 men. They mean to finish it. Taza watched Harlan carefully. Why tell us? Harlan's eyes darted to the trees. Because I got a sister who married a Cherokee. I didn't speak for her either. She died in a ditch. I don't want that blood again. He tossed something from his saddlebag, a bag of ammunition and a tin of dried meat. Then he turned and rode off into the trees, vanishing like fog. Mary turned to Taza. What now? He looked to the west. We leave. When? Now. Within minutes, they packed what little they had, blankets, food, the rifle, Taza's knife. She wore her dead husband's coat. Taza slung his satchel over one shoulder. They didn't look back at the cabin. They moved under cover of darkness, sticking to the low trees and ravines. Taza led them away from the trail, toward the high cliffs where the land broke into wild, rocky spines. The wind picked up, cruel and sharp. Mary's boots slid on ice, her breath ragged. But she didn't complain. By dawn, they reached a narrow ledge overlooking the valley. Below, smoke drifted from chimneys. Distant riders moved in a line, 5 of them, as Harlan had warned. Taza scanned the ridge. We go around the bluff, he said. But before they could move, a rifle cracked. The bullet hit near Mary's feet, spraying snow and rock. They ducked behind boulders. "They've tracked us," she whispered. "No, they expected us." Taza unshouldered the rifle. "You stay low." Mary grabbed his arm. "Don't you dare run into fire again." He looked at her. For the first time, his eyes betrayed fear, not for himself, but for her. "I won't leave you," he said. Together, they moved through the rocks, firing only when they had to. The enemy pushed from the lower ridge, tightening the circle. The thunderstorm that had rumbled through the night now arrived in full, rain driving hard, soaking the earth, turning the trail to a black, slick mess. One of the riders advanced alone, shouting curses. Mary dropped him with one shot. Another came from the side, flanking them. Taza lunged from the rocks, knife flashing in the downpour. There was no ceremony in the fight, only survival. Steel met flesh, and blood mixed with rain. They reached the tree again, lungs burning. Behind them, only 2 riders remained. One shouted orders. Another fired blind into the fog. Then silence. The storm swallowed sound. They kept moving. By nightfall, they reached a hidden cove between 2 hills, shielded by thick pine and stone. Mary collapsed beside the fire Taza built from damp bark and dry moss. She didn't ask if they were safe. She already knew the answer. The next morning, they didn't speak. Just watched the sun rise between the pines, blood orange and veiled in fog. Mary broke the silence. "What now?" Taza took a long breath. "Now we make our own law. And if they come again, they will." She looked at him. "Then we fight. Together." He nodded. They sat beside each other, shoulder to shoulder, sharing the last of the dried meat. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the scent of ash. Not from the barn, not from what they left behind, but from something new, a burning inside that would not be put out,